What's going on? What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the 300 Fathers Podcast. I am your host, Troy Woods, and today I'm doing something a little bit different. I am broadcasting live to my Facebook page, as well as recording this podcast. We got a lot of stuff going on right now in our world, in our society, and it's kind of hard to really put things in words. It's kind of hard to kind of just wrap your mind around everything that's going on. There's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of hate. There's a lot of just anger. And so I thought one thing that I would do was just kind of come on here and share it on this platform, share my thoughts and perspective on this platform, and hopefully move the message forward. One thing about 300 Fathers, our whole goal is to develop high performance fatherhood. And so what I'm finding out is that a lot of social issues that we face as men, that we face as families, we don't really talk about a lot. So I'm going to endeavor to start including that on our platform and to just, like I said, move the message forward. So I want to get right into it and just kind of share some thoughts about the situation that happened with George Floyd, and then the things, the kind of the fallout behind it. I know on Facebook, I try to keep things as positive as possible. I don't get into a lot of political stuff. Don't really talk about a lot of social issues because I know I do have a diverse crowd, but just some things like this come up and it's staring you in the face, and you don't really, you can't avoid it. You know what I mean? And so this situation with George Floyd, it hurts, man. I mean, because we're in a place where we're watching this stuff like it's like reality TV, and not unfortunately, but let me just say this: 300 Fathers is about fathers, period. Regardless of your race, regardless of your social status, regardless of whatever, it's about fatherhood. But in this episode, we're going to probably be a little bit more specific in some areas, and I just want you guys to hang with me. Our community is hurting right now. Our black community is hurting, and a lot of people, and we're so sensitive on everything now to the point where we can't even really say or feel comfortable saying certain things. There's a lot of hurt and misunderstanding going on. I saw the video when he was murdered, and I'm gonna call it what it is. It was murder. I'm not even going to try to. Well, let's wait for all the information. Nah, I mean He was restrained. He was pinned down by 3 officers, and the one that everyone is focusing on is the one that had his knee on his neck. But that kind of leads to the point of responsibility. Like, how many times do we see things happening in our world with people that we know or people that we're associated with, and we don't say anything? Like, we just let stuff happen. We kind of callous to it. So I hold all 4 equally responsible. My heart goes out to his family. Steven Jackson, retired NBA player, I had no idea how close they were until all this came out. But it leads to a bigger conversation because right now we've seen things like this happen before, especially with, I Can't Breathe. And we just kind of go back to our happy lives after it's done. And we just move on to the next thing. But there's something different about this. The anger on this one, I think people have just had enough. And when you couple this with what's going on with the global pandemic, and people have been pent up for like months, and it's all types of conspiracy theories going on. It's just a lot to really deal with. And so my heart goes out to the Floyd family and everyone connected with them. And I just know, I will say this: I've had some pretty heated conversations over the last several days with people that I'm associated with on Facebook, off Facebook, on Instagram, off Instagram. And when you talk about things like racism, I think I think there's been so much hurt over the years. It it's a complex issue. Like racism in and of itself is just terrible. But we have to be careful, and this is where I'm getting. I know you're gonna be like, why did he put traveling up here? This is where I think you have to get careful with a lot of different things. I was telling a good friend of mine last year when we were talking about something that happened, and I was saying some stuff is racism and some stuff is ignorance. Racism is what it is. I'm not going to get into it on this podcast and just start defining it. But there's a part of it. There's a part that's ignorance and not racism. And that's kind of what I want to address today, because I think we're living in a time now where we can no longer we can't live in the gray area. It's like now stuff is going on and we're looking at people like, okay, who's going to step up and say something? Like all these celebrities, like the gray area is pretty much it's gone. And so when you have racism and then you have ignorance, my thoughts, and I've seen some, and again, I hate to put these lines out here and these definitions, but I think to frame the conversation, you have to do it. Conversations that I've had with some of my white friends, and then some white people that I've followed, or Caucasian. I don't mean to be politically incorrect, y'all know that, but and the one thing that I can appreciate is that I hear folks trying to formulate what to say, knowing they may not get it right, but also knowing that the worst thing that they can do is be silent. And to me, that's where you start correcting the ignorance part. Ignorance, to me, and how I'm defining it in this situation here, ignorance is just you're unaware. Not that you're unaware that racism happens, but you grew up in an environment where you grew up around your own. Everything, your retail, your neighborhoods, where you work, you were just around your own people. You weren't in a diverse. I live in DC. This is a melting pot. Everybody's here. Like every walk of life, everything that you can imagine is around us. But I'm talking about maybe those Midwest states, those secluded areas where you're growing up, and you're growing up in an area where you only see yourself. You don't see anyone that doesn't look like you. You don't work with anyone that doesn't look like you. You don't go to school with anyone that doesn't look like you. And all you're left with is the media messages that are put out that are going to help shape your view of mankind or humankind outside of the area where you live. And then one day you grow up or you get a job or whatever happens and you move out of your bubble, and now you're hit with real life. You're hit with real life, and you don't know how to react. So you start just going off of other people that look like you, don't know what their background is, but now you start acting like them. They could be racist, but you just grew up around your own. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Like, but you're hanging around them now, and now you start picking up the mentality of the pack. I want to say this for my community, my black community. I want y'all to hear me with this, and I don't really know how to say this, but just be a straight shooter with it. And this is not all inclusive, but this is just what I see, and this is just what I'm choosing to address right now. We have to start placing value on experiences. I'm going to say that again. We have to start placing value on experiences. We place a lot of value. A lot of us feel like we're behind the eight ball, that we're coming through. A lot of us have come through the struggle. We're living in an age now where a lot of us are entrepreneurs. We have great government jobs. And so a lot of times our spending habits, or we feel like we have to make up for certain things, or we're buying stuff to impress people that don't really like us. You know, like I say, you know, we make money and then we spend money to show people that we made money. That's like the stupidest thing. And it's everybody. It's across the board. It's not just with black people. It's not just with white people. It's across the board. But I'm specifically speaking to my community. It's time out for a lot of that. We have to start giving our kids different experiences. We have to start taking them to amusement parks that aren't King's Dominion, Six Flags. We got to start investing in them and taking them to places that may cost a lot of money. Because what most people don't understand, and it's like this when you buy any luxury item, a lot of times the money that you pay, you're like, this is a lot of money. A lot of the money that you pay isn't for the item itself. It's the experience that comes with it. So everybody knows Kelly and I absolutely love Disney. Love Disney. I'm 45 years old and I love Disney like I did when I was 20, right? And one of the reasons that I love Disney is because I get to imagine different things. I get to be a kid. I get to I'm in an environment where it's purposefully created to be happy. But the biggest thing is, once you start investing in experience like that, like us, that people thought we were crazy for going on a Disney cruise a couple years ago. That was my first cruise, and I jumped all the way out there with absolutely no regrets. But once you start investing in those things, you'll find out it'll pull your mentality to another level. And you'll also be around other people who want to invest in experiences. When people want to invest in experiences, the experiences that they want are stuff that they haven't had before. That could be food, that could be a place, a destination, and that could also be around different people. That's the key part, is being around different people. I was fortunate enough, and I meant to put this in a title called The Story of Eddie. I'm going to tell y'all this real quick because this happened when I was like 8 years old, and I will never forget it. I grew up kind of a military brat. I lived in Guam for 4 years. And while I was in Guam, I had the opportunity, of course, I visited Hawaii, I visited the Philippines, I visited Okinawa, and I visited South Korea. So this took place in South Korea. And when we got there, we got to the hotel, and there was this kid named Eddie, this white kid named Eddie. He's about my age, maybe a year older, but I think he's about my age. So I didn't know Eddie from a can of paint. We met him when we got to the hotel. So me and him kind of kicked it off. And, you know, he's a little black boy coming from, they didn't know where. I'm just in South Korea. And so, you know, me and my mom was like, let's go get something to eat. And so Eddie was like, okay, I'll go with you guys. And so we went to this restaurant, and we're just all sitting around the table talking. And so the waitress comes over. It's a Korean waitress. She comes over, and she starts taking our order, right? And so we're telling her what we want, and then she's talking in her language she starts speaking Korean, and she's talking to somebody else. But what she didn't know is that Eddie understood Korean, and Eddie went off. Eddie started, I'm looking at him like, because I had never really heard the language before. Eddie starts going off, and he's speaking Korean, and his whole thing was, they're trying to take advantage of you. They're trying to rip you off. I think they were trying to charge us more for the meal than what it was actually listed for, because they knew we didn't understand the language. So my point with this Eddie story is, Eddie didn't look like me, but because he and I share a common experience, he looked out for me, and he looked out for my mom. And I think that's what's missing today, because a lot of us aren't willing to invest in these travel experiences and aren't willing to invest in getting outside of our communities and going places that, you know, maybe everybody doesn't look like you. And this isn't just for black people or white people. This is like for everybody. We live in a huge world. Like I told Kelly the other week, I said, I really want to go to Switzerland. Like, I really want to go there because it's beautiful. And I don't know when we're going to be able to get over there now, but I really want to go because it's all about experiences. My job and Kelly's job is to give our kids experiences, so when they're in a situation, they don't think that all white people are bad. And then if the situation is flipped, they don't think that all black people are bad. So we come into these unfortunately, a lot of our interactions for the first time with people are in these heated moments, right? And they're in these moments where, everything, you're 18, 20, 21 years old, heck, 30, 35 years old, and every experience that you've culminated up to this point of this interaction with this person that doesn't look like you has been a negative experience. Whether it's been somebody say, "Hey, I can't stand that so and so," or they always trying to keep us down, or they this, or they that, and you don't have any other framework for that person, and you don't know what that person. You don't know what their story is, right? You don't know where they're coming from. So now you have two people that's ignorant of each other coming together in a heated situation. How do you think that's going to turn out, right? Like, how do you think it's going to turn out? Like, I saw a picture on Facebook where there was a white cop, and he had gotten separated from during this whole riot. I don't know what city it's in. It might have been Minnesota, but he had gotten separated from from the rest of his police team, and there was like 4 or 5 black guys shielding him from the protesters, right? And then I was reading the comments, and somebody was saying they was being negative, like, this was so-and-so, this would have happened. Like, basically, why are we shielding this? And then you have other people talking about that's so good to see, that's exhibiting what love is. But I wasn't there, but I'm thinking these guys are like, these men have families to go home to. And you treat people how you're treated. Right, this guy, if he has a badge and he hasn't exhibited anything that would say to me that he's against my well-being as a police officer, because all police officers are not bad. I know plenty of them, of all different shades. They're not all bad, right? But there are some that are terrible. All right, but this cop, if he's doing his job, right, then why should we let him get attacked? Right. And then also that builds trust in the community, because now this police officer, even if he did have a negative thought towards people of color, like never acted on it, but had a negative thought, this one action of these guys protecting him so he can get back to his other fellow officers might have caused a totally different mind shift with him. Again, experiences. Right? To say, man, that could have really gone one way, but they were looking out for me. So now when he's back in that neighborhood, he's policing that neighborhood a little bit different than maybe he would have before. Now, for these officers that did what they did to George Floyd, I have no sympathy for them. I hope they get the maximum of everything that could come to them. I hope they lose everything. Right. I'm just not down with that. Like, what hurt me, and I think because coming up on 2 years since my mom passed, and when I heard it, I didn't understand the magnitude of it. When George was on that ground and that dude called for his mama, and I'm like, that got me. But then when I found out that his mom had passed 2 years earlier, and I think the anniversary of it was the week that he was killed, it kind of really did something to me, right? And so we got to be better, y'all. We have to be better. I'm all for protesting. I'm all for it. Like, because if you kneel on a football field, you get blackballed. You get hated. When you marching, you get hated. When you throwing bricks, you get hated. Like, I don't condone throwing bricks. I don't condone any of that. But what do you have to do to be heard? Like, when it's peaceful, you're causing problems. But when it's out here in the street, you're a thug. But my whole thing is, and I will say this, if you're going to cover the rioting, show everybody that's rioting. Don't just show a certain group of, now make sure you get the full spectrum of everybody that's out there rioting, so then we all can form our own opinions and we can form our own opinions and go from there. Mari says that all officers need to be punished to the full extent of the law. Absolutely. I do hold police officers to a higher standard. I do think that they put I do think that they put their lives on the line every time they go out. And I'm gonna say this too, like to all of my fellow men, to all of my fellow African American men, I'm gonna say this. If you pulled over, do what you got to do to get home to your family. It's not worth it. Don't argue. See, here's the thing. We want to cut cameras on now, and we think because we rolling live that that's going to stop an incident from happening. That's not going to stop the incident from happening. Now you have a mother, a wife, a sister, or whoever that has to deal with the result of you not coming home. Do what you have to do to get home. On the scene is not the time to be trying to figure out if this cop is a good one or a bad one. Be respectful. Do what you got to do. Now, I'm not saying you should sit there and just let somebody just beat you. I'm not saying that. But don't, when you get pulled over, just do what you got to do to get home. Just get home. It's a lot of arguing that we're doing out here, and I get it. We're upset. We're mad. But get home to your family so that you can live to fight another day. That's why, like I was telling somebody, I think it's great when you are policed by your own people. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be policed by anybody else, don't get me wrong. But again, it comes back to that relationship, right? There has to be some type of mutual understanding, right? And I'm gonna say this to all of my fellow police officers out there, and I'm sure y'all know this. If you are in charge of policing a community that does not look like you, it is your responsibility to get to know that community. Period. Like if I'm like people in the DMV, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. If I'm a police officer and I get assigned that my patrol area is going to be Fairfax, Virginia, me being a police officer in Fairfax, Virginia, it may do me some good to get to know the community that I'm going to be policing before, so that they can know me, I can know them. All right, that's all I'm saying. We just have to get better at this. I want to encourage everybody to all of my friends that don't look like me. I want to thank you for those of you that have had the courage to stand up amongst your networks of people that you know, that have offered empathy, that have offered sympathy to this situation. Thank you for your understanding. Even if you didn't know what to say, the fact that you spoke up and said, I don't know what to say, but I'm with you, means more than you will ever know or realize. But like I said, we are living in a time where we can no longer be in the gray area. We just can't. You got to make a stand, man. Screw these brands. Yeah, I said screw these brands, your personal brands, your networks, all that. Like, if you're doing something to save $1 or that you won't lose money, eventually we're going to find out. So it's about being able to live with everyone. And I'm going to close with this. I'm going to go back to how all this started. Invest in taking your kids at young ages to different experiences outside of your local markets. Like if you want to go to an amusement park, okay, if your thing, you're welcome, Sarah. If your thing is, I love Six Flags, go to a different Six Flags in another state around different people. Like, we got to get out of these clusters. That's for black people. That's for white people. That's for my Latino community. That's for my Asian community. Like, you cannot, that's why I'm not, and I'm not going to get deep into this, but that's why I'm not with all these sanctions, and we acting like as the United States, and if I lose a friend over this, I just lose it. As the United States, we act like we can be a country in this world and not need other countries. That's a macro of the micro of what I'm saying right now. We cannot exist as a country on this planet without working with other countries. We just cannot do it. It won't work. It might be temporary. Maybe we have enough resources we can last a certain number of years or whatever. But eventually, we're going to have to come out of this where we're all working together as a globe. The macro to the micro. But for that to happen, it's going to start with our kids as they grow up. We encourage them to get in positions of leadership. We encourage them to think out of the box, to not always have to dribble a basketball or throw a football. Maybe they want to work at SpaceX and send the next rocket up and come back down. We got to do different things to put this net, because it honestly, our older generation, our current generation that's in place right now, some of their mindsets won't change, and the best we can do is vote them out. But our younger generation growing up, do not segregate them and keep them to themselves. If you need to take them someplace nice and it's a lot of money, man, you might need to skip vacation this year, and you might need to save up your money and take them next year, or maybe do an overnighter this year. And then save up your coins and take them someplace. Get them out the country. Take them someplace where people spend money for experiences. Like this, all right, I'm gonna close with this, guys. At Disney World, right? We've had Six Flags passes for years, right? And Six Flags is literally like, what's going on, Dexter? Six Flags is like 25 minutes from my house. And we've had Six Flags passes for years. I mean, it's literally like kids are home during the summer. It's like going to the park. We're going to go up there for a few hours and come back home. And I wish I had thought about this earlier. So when we went to Disney, we had to temper the expectation of our children. And here's why. Because we went to Hollywood Studios first day. Then we went to Magic Kingdom the second day. And then we went to Animal Kingdom the third day. Don't sleep on Animal Kingdom. It's one of the best that they have. That's another podcast. All right. But when we go into these parks, kids were looking for roller coasters because they're used to Six Flags. And I said, look, son, they have roller coasters here. First of all, the lines are crazy, but we're going to get on some roller coasters. Disney is not a bunch of thrill rides. People come to Disney and they pay these prices to come here for experiences. You will go to Six Flags 30 times and you'll remember some of it. You can go to Disney World one time and remember it for the rest of your life. That is the power of an experience. But that stuff is not cheap. You know, when a Disney cruise before flight is $5,000 and $6,000, it's not cheap. But it's worth it. What are you willing to pay to increase your child's experience and to potentially give them an experience now that later on in life could diffuse a hostile situation because they have a better understanding of how the world works because they haven't been kept in a box and only shown themselves or only shown their way of life. Right? What does that mean? When they get a supervisor that doesn't look like them, but because they've had other positive experiences, they're not going to always think the supervisor is out to get them. Maybe the supervisor just want them to work hard. Maybe they just lazy because they've been lazy. Maybe they just need somebody to be a mentor to them to show them. Maybe they need to be in that company so they can figure out how to run their own one day. Right? We got to stop. We got to stop being short-sighted with our families. And we have to pivot now. I do not think it's by chance. I am a believer. I believe in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I'm telling y'all, I do not believe that all this is happening by chance. I don't believe it. Nothing you can tell me. Y'all can talk about the second coming. Y'all can talk about anything you want. It's nothing you can tell me to be like this moment in history where we are as a world right now with everything going on. People getting killed by police, riots everywhere, global pandemics. And all this is going on and within a 3-month time frame, and we think it's a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. It's time for us to make the pivot now. Because if we don't decide, if we don't make a decision to pivot right now, we will regret it for the rest of our lives. On top of all that, on top of being in an election year, it's time to pivot, folks. It's time to pivot. So look, for all my friends on Facebook that's been watching, I actually like this setup. I'm more than likely going to do it again. I want to thank y'all for checking in with me. For everybody on the podcast, I always appreciate you guys listening. And I don't take your time for granted. But listen, let's connect. I want to know what kind of content you guys want to hear. I want to know what kind of content we need to bring to you guys. More and more, this 300 Fathers platform is not only about high-performance fatherhood, but it's also going to start turning into some type of media social outlet. I have not fully grasped how we're going to do that yet, but these topics need to be talked about, and I want to make sure that everybody I want to make sure that we're doing our part to bring this information out. So listen, if you want to get in contact with us, you can go to our website, which is 300fathers.com, the number 300, the word fathers. So 300fathers.com. Follow us on Instagram at 300fathers, on Facebook at 300fathers, on Twitter at 300fathers. I think you get the point by now. All right. Again, I appreciate y'all working with me. Catch you on the next one. Take care.